All right, welcome everyone to our State Historical Records Advisory Board meeting. I thank you for your patience as we transition to making sure we are complying with all open meetings rules. And so the only thing I think big effect will be that I'll make sure when we have a vote that I will call individual names and just answer. So we can't just say, give me a sign or say yes. So be patient with me when we do that. We are missing a couple folks today that either had a conflict or are sick. So I think we can go ahead and get started. And if the last two folks join us, we'll catch them up. But like I said, welcome. And I would like to take a minute before we get started to introduce everybody to Dr. Darren Waters. He's our new State Historical Records Advisory Board coordinator, state coordinator. In my job, I function as the assistant coordinator. He's also the new head of the Office of Archives and History. And I thought it would be great for him to just give us a couple of seconds introduction about yourself and how you're finding the department in the first month.
Well, thank you, Sarah. It's so nice to be here with all of you all. I do see one familiar face, Drew. So Drew, it's good to see you. I hope Asheville is, things are well in Asheville. But Sarah, just to your point about how has it been, it's been great to be here. And let me just thank Sarah for being just a great partner, and I would say instructor, professor, teacher. She's helping me to get acclimated to the department. And I really appreciate this. She's been very patient with me as I've asked her a lot of questions, and will continue to do that. For those of you besides Drew who don't know me, I am obviously from Asheville, was born and raised in Asheville, North Carolina. For the past 11 years, I've been at UNC Asheville as a professor, both as a professor and an administrator. But I'm glad to be back here in Raleigh. I lived here prior to going back to Asheville for a while. I'm glad to be here and working with the wonderful people in this department. So it's been a great transition in, still a lot to learn. And I'm finding that we deal with more issues than I ever knew we would be dealing with in the department. So I want to thank Sarah for the leadership that she really provided for this area of the department before I got here. And just again, thank her for helping to make this a smooth and very rewarding transition for me. So thank you. I look forward to working with you all and getting to know you.
Yeah, thank you. We're excited to have him and getting him introduced around to all the various boards and commissions and support groups and things like that. So if you all don't mind, maybe just give a sentence introduction about yourself to Dr. Waters, so he's familiar with who we all are as well. Oh, here comes Dr. Martin. Sharon, do you want to start? I can call on people based on my order of how we see each other.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. I am Sharon Davis. I'm the Register of Deeds of Durham County, North Carolina. I have been a state employee for 33 years, but I've only been in that office for that length of time, but I've only been the Register since 2016. And it's nice to be a member of this board. It just adds something different to our normal day. Thank you.
Thank you. Adrian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Adrienne Burney. I'm Outreach Coordinator for the State Archives, and I work with the Traveling Archivist Program. So we'll hear more about that in a little bit.
Thank you. Lynn? Oh, you're still on mute.
All right, can you hear me now? You can?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lynn Gilliard, Tryon County Register of Deeds. I've been a registrar for 8 years and been with the office for 25.
Thanks.
Nice to meet you.
And Drew, you might as well join in.
Hey, Dr. Waters, I'll use my 2 sentences to give you a quick update on an old project that we both mutually cared about. Next week, the University of North Carolina at Greensboro is going to be opening up a website that shows all North Carolina slave deeds, or I'm sorry, it will show roughly 50,000 named individuals, and about 10,000 documents will be open to the public for the first time at UNCG. So something you and I got to work on a long time ago is going to be coming more to the forefront in the weeks to come. So a fun update for you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to Drew and our register community for their leadership in that project. I've kind of been a partner in that for a while, and I'm excited to see it come this far, and I hope we can continue to grow that resource because that's really great. So really appreciate all of our registers' concern for their records, and that's been fabulous.
And
Karen, oh, go ahead.
Dr. Waters, just so you know, Sarah Kuntz and the department has been incredibly helpful on that for a long time, and probably some of the driving forces of making it happen. So the state gets a lot of credit for the success of that project right now.
Karen?
Hi, I'm Karen Feeney, and I am the supervisor for the North Carolina collection at the Forsyth County Public Library in Winston-Salem.
Brooke?
Hello, I'm Brooke Chuka, outreach specialist with the State Archives. So I work with Adrian really closely, also on the Traveling Archivist program. And I'm glad to help support the work of SHRAB as well.
And Jim?
I'm Jim Martin. I'm a professor of history at Campbell University. I've been at Campbell for 31 years, and I am a recovering department chair, and I'm happy.
I was raised by a Department of History chair, or I'm sorry, English chair, so I understand what that feels like.
Oh, yes.
To be
I never
raised by a
met in my
recovery chair. Very good. Well, I'm glad y'all could join us today, and we'll work through our agenda here. I won't try to keep everyone too long. I apologize if there's background noise. I feel like whenever I get on a call, there's an ambulance that comes by or something. First order of business real quickly is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting on June 23rd. Did anyone have any edits for or suggestions, changes with the minutes? Okay, if not, I think for the purpose of the rules of order, I'm going to need a motion in a second, and then we'll do a roll call vote for the minutes.
I motion to accept the minutes as is.
I second them, Karen.
Thank you. All right. And moved and seconded that the meeting's minutes are approved as written. I'll call the roll real quick. Jim?
Approve, yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
And Lynn?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Again, apologies for that long process.
We're not used to your formalities, Sarah.
What's that?
We're not used to your voting formalities.
I know, exactly. It seems very formal for our group. Okay. Next on the agenda, typically we have a little bit of space for updates from the Office of Archives and History and the State Archives. I had promised Darren I wouldn't make him make a big presentation for our first meeting, and we have a lot of other business, and I'll keep mine brief as well. So I'm just going to give you a couple highlights. Absolutely feel free to ask me any questions or ask Darren any questions about sort of larger business of the archives or the department itself. We're a little bit in limbo in the department, waiting for a budget, but hopefully that'll come. We keep hearing rumors that things are going to happen, so we're hopeful. And one of the things I'm very hopeful about is this year there was an expansion position for the archives to be based in the East in our records analysis unit to work specifically with county and municipal records holders on making sure their records are protected, that we get these smaller municipalities get their records backed up from the clerk's office, things like that, specifically, aimed at. We've been asking for this position for a number of years in the areas that are really prone to floods after hurricanes. So hopefully that will come to pass, and I'll have some good news when the budget is finally finalized. In the meantime, a couple of things from the archives. We are reopening fully for regular office hours. So starting Monday, we will be open Monday through Friday all day. And then in November, I believe it's the 13th, we're going to go back to our traditional Tuesday through Saturday. We kind of felt like Saturday was an important time to allow researchers to come in that couldn't come in during the week. So we're back to full business, and that's been going fine. Public hours have been going smoothly, and there's really, we've been doing it safely, so we feel like we can open up fully. Just a couple other sort of highlights. We've mounted a couple of interesting new digital collections in our digital collections that we share with the state library that y'all might be interested in. One of those that I hope will get a lot of good attention, our audiovisual archivist had gone through a series that seems like it might be kind of boring. It's school construction photos from the Department of Public Instruction, but they are primarily schools in African-American neighborhoods. And we specifically were picking ones, if they were Rosenwald schools that were not included in Fisk University's online archive. So this might be, in some cases, the only images of buildings and communities that are no longer around. So trying to be a little bit specific and not just do the whole series, but look for things that were not previously documented in other online resources. We also added some selections from a collection that I'm partial to because I helped process it many, many years ago. It's called the Good Neighbor Council. It sort of morphs into the Human Relations Commission, but it was a really early effort by the governor's office around 1964 to work on specifically on race relations in cities. And they were trying to foster good neighbor councils on the local level as well as the state level. So there's selections of highlights from those materials. And that's kind of, I think, an underused collection that we have from the early 1960s. So those have been digitized. We've wrapped up our grant that we had to process our colonial court records. So our very, very earliest court records have been fully reprocessed, fully described online. A number of the loose pieces have been digitized and put in a collection where folks can help us transcribe them. And then we're in the process of digitizing all of the court dockets. Now, those will just be available like you would look through a book. You kind of flip through the images. They're not going to be indexed down to the item level because we don't have enough time in the day to get that done. But they will certainly be much more accessible than they ever have been in the past. So we're pretty excited about that. Folks have been really excited to read colonial court records and lots of good stuff. And Adrian and Brooke have been working on some resources for teachers using selected court records to talk about what do we know about people's lives in the early 1700s in Eastern North Carolina, based on what we're seeing in the court record. So that's been really positive. The department also just a month ago did a very large presentation to the Commission of Indian Affairs about all of the department's work. And then we had a specific carve out section about the America 250th commemoration planning that's ongoing. And so I think that went really well. We spent a lot of time detailing for the commission members all that our agency does and where they can intersect with that work and amplify our work. So I'm hopeful that will bring about further connections with the agency. And hopefully even things like suggestions of possible SHRAB board members or people for boards and commissions like that. So that was something that I was really excited about. And about the only other thing I'll add is if you're interested in cemeteries, we're finalizing a really good program, I think, for the Friends of the Archives. It will be November 1st on All Saints Day, kind of our joke on cemeteries. And it's going to be partnering with the Office of State Archaeology and an archaeologist from ECU to sort of talk all things cemeteries, how to preserve cemeteries, how to read cemeteries, a little bit about the Office of State Archaeology's work, that kind of thing. So we're excited by that. So look for some information if you're interested in attending that. And I see that Sharon said she attended a Rosenwald school. That's very cool. Very cool. They certainly, I should also mention, I know we're kind of in the final planning stages of working on a lesson plan with Carolina K-12 about Rosenwald schools and African-American education. So that will be good to get those resources ready as well. Very cool. So I know that was a lot of information. I know I talk really fast. Any questions for me from anything from across the department or anything you're curious about? Okay, sounds good. Always let me know if you have a question on anything going on specifically in the archives or across the department. We're happy to get you more information about that. Okay. That is going to take us to more of the meat of our agenda here. And I think the first thing up, we wanted to have an opportunity for Adrian to talk about what's been going on with the traveling archivist visits. You may recall our current grant, we had kind of two pieces. We had the tutorial videos that were created, those were done. And then we've been working with 6 selected cultural repositories of different types across the state. And Adrian can give an update on where we're at with that.
Okay, so you may remember from earlier meetings that a bunch of our applicants were from the community college archives, and they all had common patterns in their applications, including that none of them had really developed policies yet, and promotions was another weak area. So because we started out with the consultations all online, it made sense to develop a couple of online webinars, training sessions for specific to community college archives audiences. And Brooke started about that time, so I kind of threw her into the sink or swim with that, and she swam really well and helped pull together those 2 training sessions. So unfortunately, Erin Larimore is not with us today, but she was a big leader and did the instruction for both of those. And then we pulled in another community college archives leader and additional peers that had good examples for each of those sessions. So those are currently posted for on-demand viewing at the North Carolina Community College Archives Association YouTube channel. So that's an ongoing resource that those folks can use. So we're pretty happy that section went well, the section of our training. And this summer we also started doing the on-site visits. So Erin Larimore again did 3 of the on-site visits. I've visited 4 so far. I need to schedule a couple more, hopefully this month or early November. And so that's moving along really well. We're delivering some supplies, mostly acid-free folders and hydrothermographs, and talking to them about basic preservation when I go. Erin's, of course, more the expert on arrangement and description. So she's been focusing on that in her visits and doing a great job with recommendations. And then we're also trying to help people get their materials prepared for the Digital Heritage Center. And the Digital Heritage Center folks are also scheduling a few on-site trainings. And some of these organizations have digitization capabilities in-house, so they'll be training them to make the most of their resources. And others don't plan to do that in-house. So we'll be working with each of those, and either I or the Digital Heritage Center will be picking up some of their collections and getting them to Chapel Hill for digitization. And then the final step that we'll work toward, and hopefully I'll have more good news to report next time we meet on this, is working with each of the organizations to develop promotional activities to really promote their collections in their communities and underscore how important they are. So that's the next big push after we complete the visits.
Any questions for Adrian or comments about the TAP visits? Okay. I should say, and I can follow up with this. I don't think I've sent it to y'all. We just completed an interim narrative report on the grant, so I can send that out to everybody as a follow-up. I think it was just last week we turned it into NHPRC. So I'm happy to follow up with that as well. And Adrian also has completed, so for the grant application that we submitted this spring that will be considered at the November commission meeting, as is usual with that process, they read it and then they sent it out to reviewers, and the reviewers came back with a couple questions. And so we just had to answer that, and we've submitted those answers as well. Make myself a note to send out the grant report. All righty. Okay. So there's nothing about the current grant else that we need to talk about. Let's shift our focus to the work plan. You may recall when we left our last meeting in June and approved the strategic plan, the idea was that we would create a work plan around the strategic plan items with some deliverables. And this would be something that we would revisit, every year, year and a half, and update as needed as things inform our work. But the work plan was supposed to be more of a nuts and bolts. This is what we're going to try to accomplish in the next year type of thing to inform the strategic plan. So we had sent that draft out. Thank you to Brooke and Adrian for creating this framework. And I just wanted to throw it open for any questions or comments. We were trying to focus, thinking that we were going to be having this meeting in 2021, that it would take us through the rest of this year and then in through 2022. So that's kind of how we were thinking about it in terms of putting down specific activities, and that we could also certainly adapt it as needed. If, as I said, if things come up or situations change. So that's the strategy, and I'm happy to walk through these, or I don't know if you had any questions. We delivered them around each of the goals and each of the strategies that we had in our strategic plan. So, for example, if we're continuing the TAP program, pending funding, we would have another cycle next year, and then start the implementation of evaluation. I think that was one of the things we talked about in the strategic plan, having a little bit more specific evaluation data after visits. So, creating that framework. Thinking around strategy 2 about continuing to create a list of topics to add for our video resources, and then maybe prioritizing them and then finding 1 or 2 to do each year. And we certainly, would start with the list first and then come up with creating the videos. Creating some other resources for smaller repositories, like that they could use policy templates, things like that. And then some of the things in there are going to be dependent on if we get our grant, and what we'll be able to accomplish. Yeah, the last strategy under goal 1 was about updating the NC ECHO contact list. And with that, we thought it was feasible to start with the staff person who's working with America 250th and start building out the list and looking at the list and updating it before we went out and did any additional survey work, but try to use our own social networks to try to see what needs to be updated and corrected on the NC ECHO list. Anything on goal 1 in any of the strategies that?
Hey, Sarah, real quick, are you looking at the NC TRAB goals and strategies 2022 through 2025?
No, I'm looking at the work plan, which was attached to the meeting invite.
Mm-hmm. We'll just pull up the right doc. Sorry, I just want to be on the same page as you.
Yep, sorry. And try to see if I can put it in. Adrian, can you share that?
Yeah, I'll try to share.
I've got it. It was just a
Okay.
Word doc, so it wasn't with my
Yeah.
other PDFs. So it,
Yeah, yep.
I'm a
Yeah.
Word doc. Sorry.
Sorry, yeah, it's a short little Word doc. Yeah, there it is. Perfect. So yeah, that was just goal 1 that I had, and I don't know if anyone has any questions about goal 1. Trying to strike a balance between things that are achievable, like we want to get things done, but not be too overly ambitious that we at the end of the year go, oh, we didn't get that done.
Sarah, can I insert something about goal
Absolutely.
1? So one thing, we want board members to be as involved as possible. And one opportunity coming up, if again, pending funding, if we're able to get funding for the traveling archivists to continue, we have built into the proposal travel funds to do about 5 a year of on-site visits as part of the consultation. And so we're thinking we would have kind of a schedule like we did this previous year, with applications being advertised in January. Of course, we'll rely on you all to share that with your networks as well as those we have access to. And then we would meet with a subgroup to select the recipients. And we had wrote Dr. Martin into that last year so he can, let anybody know if it's too much work or too annoying to work, but we would love to have one or two more, if there's more interest, SHREB members be on that subcommittee to select. And again, that's pending funding with this grant that's in proposal form now. So think about that. No one has to step up and volunteer today, but I'll send out reminders as we, roll with that. But if you're really eager to step up today, that would be wonderful too.
Okay, Adrian, can you roll to goal 2? A couple of the strategies there. Thank you. So some of this we put on the agenda for later today, thinking like this was something that had come up in our discussions of the strategic plan as a priority that we think about what would we want for an advocacy or public awareness goals for the year as a board. So that's the first activity under strategy 1 there under goal 2. And then the second one, of course, will be dependent on the grant, but pending funding, the grant application that we submitted last year has some money for stipends for people to go to professional training or meetings. That would be another activity for that goal. And then for strategy 2, that was more around the advocacy materials, sort of crediting the SHRAB and raising awareness of the SHRAB. So sort of the same thing with the upcoming potential for another TAP visits, that we would start creating language that we would give to recipients to say, here's how you can promote your project and credit the TAP, including some testimonials or other feedback online and putting those materials on the SHRAB website and things like that, doing a TAP evaluation process to help make sure that those visits are evaluated and strengthened and informed by feedback from users. Talked about, again, like having a logo to help with the SHRAB sort of identification. So those were all goals for that strategy. And then one of our strategies under this goal was also to be specifically called out, how can we be more of service to the African American Heritage Commission that is housed within our department. And so those goals are pretty straightforward, being specific, what can we do to support your work with communities that you're serving in terms of preservation of their documentary heritage. And then the second item under strategy 3, support the organization's planning process for a survey. You may recall, that's been something that the commission executive director and myself, the state librarian, have been talking about possibly trying to do a statewide survey pending grant funding to get a sense of where are African American historical collections held across the state, both in repositories and then maybe in more informal or non-traditional cultural heritage places. So they did submit a planning grant application to NHPRC to support that, like kind of get that project going. Kind of like us, they just got their first round of review or feedback and had to answer a few questions. Looks pretty positive. So I'm hopeful, as long as that grant category is not too crowded with other applicants. It's a different grant category than the SHRAB is in. That one was submitted under something called Archives Collaborative grant. So that's partners across multiple places. So I'm hopeful they'll get it. The review site seemed pretty good. So that would be positive for this strategy, that we could support them in that process of, along the way. I think when we know who's out there, then we know what their needs might be, and that helps us better inform what kind of resources we can develop to help them. Any questions on that goal? Okay. Goal 3 was really around infrastructure. This was something that had come up in our survey we did before the strategic plan about making sure that members of the SHRAB come from a variety of places and backgrounds. So I think it would be great. I know we have 3 appointments that are up in October. If you all have thoughts on anyone from your community or maybe another community, maybe a group that isn't represented on the SHRAB, I'd be happy to take names and suggestions for board members, because I think we're going to continue to look broadly for membership and suggest that to the governor's office. So I don't know if there's other groups that you're aware of, or folks in your community that might want to serve as well. Just let me know that. And that would be something that I would ask annually from you all.
Sarah,
Mhm.
Sarah, do you know if we have Native American representation on our board currently?
We do not,
Okay.
to my knowledge. So that would be definitely an area that we would welcome some input on. So I don't know if there's anyone in the western part of the state. One thought that I had was I had the opportunity to connect with the curator from the Museum of the American Indian at UNC Pembroke that might, be a good connection, but there's certainly many tribes in North Carolina. So if there's other, cultural groups or institutions associated with a tribe, if we know someone that has a, preservation minded person and they would like to be on the board, I'm happy to take those names. So yeah, just let me know, certainly follow up with me, because we'll need to kind of give some feedback to the governor's office if we have suggestions in the next couple weeks. And then the other one, this would be also an ask of you all, would be to think through, we had some conversations in strategic planning about what kind of materials would be useful as new board members are onboarded. So that would be something we'd want to explore in the next, couple months, like what would be useful if someone, what kind of materials to read, what kind of meetings or background information, so that we can get some of that stuff drafted for review and ready for use in the next year. So that was part of what we were looking at there. Any other comments? I was just trying to hit the highlights there. Adrienne, anything you want to add?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
Well, maybe with the onboarding materials, just to get people thinking a little more about that. I remember at an earlier meeting, Monica suggested something clarifying all the alphabet soup that we tend to throw out, and NCPC, NHPRC, and CCCAA, all of that. So that's something we can definitely get a start on, but we would welcome any other ideas for what would be helpful for those who are new to SHRAB when they begin their terms.
Any concerns with any of the content on the draft work plan? Anything you think is too ambitious, not ambitious enough? Any suggested changes?
Looks good, Sarah.
If there's no other comments, I think probably the best thing to do would be to have a motion in a second, and then we can formally adopt the work plan, if that works for everybody.
I'd be glad to make that motion.
Okay, thanks, Drew. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, excellent. Okay, bear with me, we'll do our roll call again. Maybe I'll just go down my screen this time. Okay, Lynn,
Here.
Drew,
Good.
Karen,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
you're on
Yes.
mute, Sharon, if she said anything.
Yes for me.
Okay, Sharon, She may have had someone interrupt her. I know that's hard to, with you guys' busy offices, to get away. Okay. You can probably stop sharing, Adrian. All right. Thank you for my technical support. Takes a village to get me going, to keep me running right. Okay. So, and we've already kind of covered this, but if there are board orientation materials that you think would be helpful, and it doesn't have to be in writing, if you say, okay, I think it'd be great for you to have a meeting with someone and cover these topics. Anything like that, I'm happy to hear that, because that was something we had some feedback on, like we said on the survey, and we had some conversation around it. So that would be really helpful if you let us know, because I think in the next couple months, we would probably try to be drafting some things or thinking through what that would look like for feedback, and say, is this what you had in mind? So do let us know that. And the other piece was, we had talked about having an advocacy priorities for each year. So I don't know if people had thoughts on, is there something that you're hearing that would be helpful for us to be thinking about advocacy wise, in terms of, protection of our historical records or cultural repositories, whether that's a state or a local or a national level. Is there something that you think would be a good focus area for the next, say, through 2022, for us to kind of think about? Maybe raise, and that, advocacy can take a number of formats: raising awareness, lending support, depending on what's needed. I know some of you as elected officials that, we've got to be careful what we weigh in on, but maybe on a national level, there's other issues too that we can lend our voice to as a board. Anything come to mind?
Sarah, is there anything that you want us to be advocating for right now?
I can't think of anything right off the top of my head. I think the budget might help us see what's going on in terms of just kind of general support for cultural heritage. I feel like at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a little more concern that some of our local museums or historical societies might close, and that hasn't really come to pass. I know in High Point, for example, there was a lot of concern they were going to get rid of the museum, and they didn't do that. So that's the kind of thing that would be on my radar if something was immediately coming up. Other than that, I think I don't have anything specific yet. I know that there's talk again of, among the archival associations, the biggest ones, and that would be the Council of State Archivists, Society of American Archivists, and then a National Association of Archives and Records Managers. We meet monthly. There's a team that's identified from each of those organizations. I represent the Council of State Archivists on that, and we meet monthly and talk about advocacy issues. And they would like to restart conversations to explore a block funding grant program for archives. And so this would be something similar to what state libraries get through a pot of money called LSTA. That's the acronym for their funding, and that goes out to local libraries. There's a piece of that goes out to local institutions. So just trying to figure out where's the right place to go with that. And so if that comes up, that would be something that we definitely would need to advocate for if it turns into an actual physical bill, in Congress and things like that. I think in the past, we've talked about advocating for funding for archives, say at the National Archives, because they give grants out. But it looks like the budget process is even worse this year on the federal level than it has been in the past. I'm not sure I could believe that, but so there's really nothing to say. I mean, no budget bill seems to be moving to finalize funding for the federal government. So at the moment.
On the state level, do you feel like the budget negotiations and process right now is favorable towards cultural resources right now, or is there concerns there?
No, I haven't heard any concerns. I think things should be pretty good. like I said, I would be pleased if we got an additional position to help with that. I mean, we could always use more, but that's just the way the process works. You ask for some, and hopefully you make some progress. But I think the one area that I'm disappointed in is we don't seem to be going to get any funding for America 250th right now. And I think that's a big area that could use some support. And I'm hoping some support that could then make it to the local level for, whatever kind of festivals, commemorative activities that people want to do to kind of celebrate their communities as well. So, and then that's coming up. I know it feels like it's a ways off, but it's not too soon to start planning. So I think that's my only area of disappointment. And that might be something you want to do on the local levels is ask around who's interested in kind of organizing around America 250th activities. And I could certainly provide you with additional resources because we're designing our commemorative period in the department to be about not just revolutionary North Carolina, but an opportunity to celebrate and explore historical time periods, like people who are helping us live into our best promises of our democracy. So for example, who are our champions of voting rights through the years, or things like that it doesn't just have to be confined to the Revolutionary War time period. We're looking for opportunities to tell stories about, when are we us, and where do we have common ground, and things like that. So. We can kind of leave that one too, but I would like to hear if we have any sort of, I don't know if there's any concerns from any county offices or anything, no sorts of records that seem to be endangered, or, the things like that we want to make sure we're listening for too. I'm just trying to think if there's any other things. I think it's a little bit like, again, because we don't have a federal, we don't have a state budget, but as those things get settled, that might be an opportunity to kind of think over the winter time about directions. I know there was at some point talk of having a small amount of money for registrars' offices for preservation. I don't know where that ever ended up, but is there anything from your end that, in terms of protection of your records, preservation of your records, that would be important for us to know about too?
No, not that I'm aware of in my office. We're pretty much got great deal of our records are already, they're not online, but I do have them on my computer. They're not for public use, but we're doing pretty good as far as preserving everything.
Okay. It seems like there are a lot of small counties that would absolutely benefit from having some digitization help amongst registrars of deeds. Yeah, it seems like the big counties, I think Sharon and I will forever have great funds available to do digitization efforts on our own without needing much assistance. But the Chowan County Register of Deeds office and smaller, specifically Eastern North Carolina counties, or even far west, like some of those records are never going to get digitized if there's not a little bit of assistance, because the way the funding structure is set up is it just doesn't benefit these smaller entities. But I think specifically about some of our oldest counties on the East Coast, having some critically important records. Sarah, you and Becky know better than anyone, but I don't know what state of preservation is there on some of their earliest records, and if we could continue to assist them in digitizing everything as quickly as possible so we don't lose anything, the better. So, and at the same time, the Register of Deeds Association is in a challenging place because we want to meet in person, and so we do, but then no one shows up because we're in the middle of a pandemic, and then it's a bit of a mess. So we struggle to have much cohesion as a Register of Deeds association over the past 2 years to some degree. So I know I haven't checked in with them on this specific issue.
Well, one thought to that's a good good thought. I mean, because it sounds to me like what I'm hearing you say is the preservation fund is nice, but it's not necessarily the smaller counties could still use some assistance or some infusion of resources to support digitization. And maybe one way to think about that might be if we get our Eastern office analysts, that could be part of a responsibility theirs as they're traveling, because that job is really going to need to travel. That's the way it's set up, is to be primarily on the road and working with some of these smaller municipalities who they might only have a couple or one employee in the town, and the town hall flooded, or they just don't have the resources to protect their records. It's easy for me to say, oh, bring them to Raleigh and we'll digitize them for you, but someone's got to shut up the town hall and bring them to Raleigh. So that's part of their job, is to help with education and inventorying and physically bringing records to us. Now that's like town clerks and their minutes, but maybe a piece of that could be to also visit the registers in those counties and just check in on needs and digitization possibilities there. So kind of maybe do some information gathering from our standpoint. And that might be a better place than coming from the registers. If our office says, hey, we identify this as a need in our localities, that'd be a great place if we had a federal block grant program for digitization. That's to be exactly what it would be for counties and municipalities. So that might be useful on a state and a national level if we want to think about that as a potential priority, just to kind of get a sense of where those needs are that might help with that. Because I anticipate that analyst is going to be traveling a lot.
Sarah, Darren, I also, if this is more publicly available than it has prior been, and we should be referring to you by your proper titles and not your first names, please feel free to correct us and let us get on a better professional footing if we need to be.
Well, I tend to be informal, so I certainly don't mind. You can always call me Sarah. I don't need a title.
I'm the same way, Drew. Okay.
Well, again, let's keep thinking about that. I think that's a good possibility to think through and start some conversations about what would it take to support advocating for a digitization program for our counties and municipalities, and what that would look like. That seems like should be right up our alley. Making myself a note here. Okay. And certainly pass on if you have any other ideas after we get off the call too. Okay. The last big thing I wanted to cover was with noticing public meetings, it's a whole lot easier if you have a schedule set. And not that we can't change the schedule, but that makes the noticing process a lot easier and setting the agenda easier. Because there is a little bit of a process to that through the Secretary of State's office and then publishing physical notices in our building and on our website. So I was going to propose, and I just wanted to run this by you all, that we think about trying to set and adopt a meeting schedule for 2022. That might make it a little bit easier. I kind of felt like, and I just throw this out there, that maybe 3 times a year would be fine. Not knowing where the pandemic's going to be in the winter time, I was going to suggest maybe we think about if we did it every, say, 4 months. So like a February, June, October, beginning of the month, maybe. June felt like, and Jim can weigh in on this, maybe school would be over. And if we tried to have an in-person meeting in June, would that work? Could we try to do an in-person meeting in June with the other 2 being virtual? So just throwing that out there. I don't know if there's days of the week. I know some of you and a couple other folks that are not on the call would have to travel if we did an in-person meeting. So is that something where you would prefer to have a day of the week where we identify a meeting, and so, knowing that we'd have to travel?
Wednesdays is always a good day for my office.
Wednesday?
Most of the time. Mhm.
Okay.
For me, it's usually like a Monday or a Friday.
Karen, you're saying Mondays and Fridays are better?
Yeah, for me anyway.
I imagine imagine most registers of deeds are likely going to be the worst days are Mondays and Fridays, and the middle of the weeks are usually, they're just slower. So yeah, I would probably lean towards that Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday schedule. And I like the idea of one in-person meeting, also saying let's not make it a firm, we're definitely going to meet in person, because it seems like the world is changing every week and it's hard to plan that.
Yeah, absolutely. That can be aspirational or something to look forward to. But I learned that I don't ever, when everyone asks me, what are we going to be doing? I don't know what I'm doing in 2 weeks, because things seem to change so quickly sometimes. Okay. Maybe if our majority is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we could probably stick to that. Maybe let's try for Wednesdays and see where that gets us. And again, we can change this, but would you guys be okay with, say, the first week in those months? So that would be Wednesday, the 3rd of February. The first Wednesday in June is the 1st. And then it would be October 5th.
And we're talking about morning meetings. I'm sorry if I missed that before.
I didn't say, do we have a consensus on, is morning better than the afternoon or vice versa?
Mornings work best for me, but
Okay.
I mean, if it's not, a travel to Raleigh is not that,
Right.
it's not that bad for me either, if it's morning or afternoon. So whatever's best for everyone else.
When we traveled before, which seems like 1,000 years ago, it was usually around 11, and then we usually had lunch, so that wasn't too far if you wanted to drive early in the morning, or not getting you back too late. So that's what we've typically done. So we just say tentatively 11, and we could always change it. Does that sound like maybe a good goal?
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
And what was that date in was it February and
February,
June?
I was looking, February 3rd. Go back, oops. No, that's not right. I'm sorry, I apologize. February 2nd is the first Wednesday. I apologize. February 2nd, June 1st, October 5th.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Announcements, business? Anything else for the good of the cause?
Sorry to use more time than I should be using for the group, but anything we can continue to do as we are anticipating hopefully a big celebration for the 250th anniversary. I think North Carolina will be in a better place if we have better relationships with the African American community and Historical Resources Commission, and if we can have something up and running with our Native American.
Right.
And I know we've stated that, but anything we can continue to do to continue to foster those relationships, going into the 250th relationship, going into the 250th, I feel like we will have a better standing to talk about what America is and what our hopes are and what who we were leaving out 250 years ago, and
Right.
at the expense of whom we were so successful.
And I think that that's kind of been a universal point made from the statewide coordinators. About half of the states have a statewide commissioner committee like we do. And universally, everyone is very interested in that push. So that's, I think, and you're going to see that, I think, from the National Commission as well. In terms of the American Indian focus for the America 250th, I think the important first step was to talk to the commission, because it's not a monolithic story, and it's not a story that we should be crafting ourselves. I've had a couple people say that to me, like, oh yeah, the Cherokees are all ready to tell the story of the Rutherford expedition. And I'm thinking, well, I need to hear directly from that community how that's going to look and how we can assist. Or amplify something, but I want to make sure their voices are at the table, not just like at the end of the writing of the story, say, how does this look to you? So there's some work to be done there. And I think the first step was to talk to the commission and just outline what we're doing and invite participation and invite and welcome people into the discussions, because you're going to see different stories from different tribes, and that's great. And we don't want to assume that it's all just like one story, like I said. So yeah, we're hoping to continue that conversation. And I think maybe one of the next steps, after we just had a national, like I said, a coordinators meeting earlier this week, and Pennsylvania has been at their celebration since, I guess, 2018. So they're organized very, very early. And they've been going out to county commissioners. And that gave me the idea, well, hey, that might be a next good first step in North Carolina, is to go to county, associations, like you have the Association of Registered Deeds, associations of county commissioners and municipalities, and just kind of start laying the groundwork for this idea that, let's give space for you to celebrate your local visionaries of freedom, who in your communities are people that you look to that are helping us, like you said, live into the ideals of the revolution in modern times. So hopefully we'll be able to do that soon too. All righty. Anything else for anybody? Okay, well, how about this? If we have a motion to adjourn in a second, then we'll take that as a positive vote. We won't need to run through the roll call.
Make that motion.
Oh, I second.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate it.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Good to see you all.
Good to see you
Have a
guys.
good one.
Be safe.
Yeah.